A reading from Paul's first letter to the church at Corinth. I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions just as I handed them on to you. But I want you to understand that Christ is the head of every man, and the husband is head of his wife, and God is head of Christ. Any man who prays or prophesies with something on his head disgraces his head. But any woman who prays or prophesies with her head unveiled disgraces her head. It is one and the same as having her head shaved. For if a woman will not veil herself, then she should cut off her hair. But if it is disgraceful for a woman to have her hair cut off or to be shaved, she should wear a veil. For a man ought not to have his head veiled, since he is the image and reflection of God, but woman is a reflection of man. Indeed, man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for the sake of woman, but woman for the sake of man. For this reason, a woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, or man independent of woman. For just as a woman came from man, so man comes through a woman, but all things come from God. Judge for yourselves, is it proper for a woman to pray with her head unveiled? Does not nature itself teach us that if a man wears long hair, it is degrading to him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. For if anyone is disposed to be contentious, we have no such custom, nor do the churches of God. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Isn't that a bit much? Isn't that a bit much? I did not say to Paul, but I said to my wife. It was well before 5:30 in the morning, and she'd put on a white dress, white hose, white shoes. She had clasped a golden circular pendant right beneath her collarbone, and she had affixed a strange starched hat to the top of her head that looked more like a castle than anything else. I said, isn't that a bit much? And to which she retorted with some indignation, this is what RNs wear. And I could tell, not only was she indignant, but I could also perceive in her voice that there was a sense of pride and confidence in what she had on. And so I never said that again. In years to come, I would see those hose splattered with blood. I would shine those shoes many, many times. But I never said another word about that. And we got into my truck, and I drove her to Montclair, a Baptist hospital, where she took her place in the cardiac intensive care unit. She was 19 years old. Kay's uniform says something about her, and she knows very well that she is a healer, and she takes that seriously. And although the uniform has changed throughout the years, she has worn the uniform of a healer for almost a half century. And so her uniform says something about what she brings before God as an offering and what she brings before the people that God has given her to care for. It is her uniform, and all of us wear a uniform of one sort or the other, if you think about it. And it is symbolic. It's symbolic of our offering to God and our offering to humanity. It is a terrible thing not to make the offering, and it's almost as bad to disparage the offering of another, which will be unique to that person. In Paul's rather circular appeal to the resistant Greek church at Corinth, he says, if any man comes before God to pray or prophesy with anything on his head, he disgraces his head. And if any woman comes before the Lord to pray or prophesy, with her head unveiled, she disgraces her head. It's one and the same thing, Paul goes on to say, as if she just shaved her hair off. So, now, I hope you caught in what Paul said, the fact that both women and men have equal gifts. Both can pray and prophesy before the Lord. But there's also the understanding that men and women are different, and therefore their gifts would take on a different shape. And so we come before the Lord a bit differently. I often tell people when we promise to pray for them at our home, which we always keep a very long prayer list at the house, I often make the joke that's only half joking when I say, I don't know if my prayers get through, but I'm sure that Kay's do. Her sincerity in our prayer life sometimes really puts me to shame. We come to the Lord with our unique selves and our unique gifts. And so it's important. And I would say this, it came to me as I was writing the sermon, that we come with our one-of-a-kind gifts before the Lord. I mean, it's always magnificent to me as I realize that God didn't make any copies. You know, what we have are incredibly unique individuals. And so we all come before the Lord as unique individuals with unique gifts. And it's really a terrible thing not to give those gifts. We in the church often are urging people to, go ahead. Give the gifts that you have while you can give them before you're giving them on the other side of the veil. But it's to begin to want our gifts to be the same and disparaging the other person's gift because they are not the same is the sin of Cain. Cain was upset because Abel's gift was different from his. What if Cain had just said, "Oh, yippee! He's bringing the fruits of the earth, and now he's bringing the fruits of the animals, and I'm bringing the fruits of the earth." What if he could have celebrated that? But he couldn't, and so it ended up being a deadly mistake. You always have to keep in front of we always have to keep in front of ourselves that in this first letter to the Corinthians, Paul is trying to teach a congregation how to be together. That's what he's interested in. He is not interested in telling us, how loving a marriage should be necessarily, although we have used his text from the 13th chapter ad infinitum for that purpose. He is interested in showing us how a congregation must live and minister and share together. And those of us who have been in the church for a long time know how difficult that can be. He was very wise. And in this case, he is calling on some customs that don't make a whole lot of sense to us any longer. But the major point is the same. We all come to the Lord with our different selves, often different in, half the time, different genders. And we bring different gifts, but we have to live and love together. Only Eugene Peterson could find beauty in a text that most people find as sheer tedium. Peterson interprets verses 12 and 13 this way. Let's see if I can remember. He says that the first woman came from a man is true. But since that time, he goes on to say, every man has come from a woman. and everything comes from God. So let's quit this discussion of who's first. It's a bad routine. And then Peterson pauses, and he goes, but isn't the symbolism beautiful? A woman comes before God with her hair, which is reminiscent of the angels and their prayers of adoration. And a man comes to the Lord with his head bared in reverence, and he becomes a symbol of submission. There we have it. With these different types of people, we show the beautiful, the beautiful combinations of what God has. We come to him with prayers of adoration. We come to him with prayers of submission. And Lord knows we need both. Neither one would be a bit too much.